Welcome, everyone. Good evening to the class Maryam, the Muslim Mary, an interreligious figure who divides and unites us. And I'm so excited to be kicking off this new season of learning with you at ICJS, of new learning and hopefully new growth. And if I could just introduce myself for those who don't know me. My name is Zeyneb. I'm the Muslim scholar here at the Institute for Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies. And I was born and raised in Germany. And interreligious learning was always intrinsic to my upbringing, and then gradually became an academic pursuit, an academic passion. And the reason why I became interested in interreligious work was that I couldn't recognize as a Muslim in the negative stereotypes and in the mainstream public discourse about Islam, the wisdom and beauty that I have encountered in my tradition. So as a public educator and as a Muslim scholar, it is dear to my heart to help people understand a little bit about Islam and Muslims, and also share my own story, share my own narrative, and hopefully build bridges of understanding. Now, needless to say that I cannot do justice to this amazing spiritual giant whom we call Saint Mary in the Christian tradition, or Maryam. Sayyidina Maryam, Our Lady, our Mother Maryam in the Islamic tradition. 3 Zoom sessions, 3 million Zoom sessions wouldn't be enough to explain her significance, to really understand her persona, her aura, her spiritual significance. We have to go back to the generations before us, to centuries of learning and all what has come out, from the richness of our traditions and what she has meant to so many people throughout centuries. And I think then we will get a glimpse of her, but no class will ever do justice to this amazing figure whom we call Saint Mary or Maryam in the Islamic tradition. And as I was preparing this class, there was a point where I thought, does it even make sense right now to talk about Mary? What's the point about talking about Mary in this moment? And but then as I was reading a little bit about her, and especially about poetry, there were some beautiful poems about her, and the rich literature about her. I came across this prayer written by an anonymous German person. And like I said, I was born, raised in Germany. German literature is a passion of mine. I've majored in German literature. And as I was reading this beautiful prayer by an unknown author, it just resonated with me and captured what I felt in this moment. So I wanted to begin by offering this prayer and share this prayer with you all, and hope that it resonates also with you. So if I may just read it out loud, first in Deutsch, in one of my native languages, and then I will offer the translation.
Unmute. Now can you hear? This was unmuted.
There's some background noise. If you could please keep yourself on mute, I would appreciate, so we can all pay attention to the content. So the German prayer goes, Gebet zur Gnadenmutter. Alles möchte ich dir erzählen, alle Sorgen, die mich quälen. Alle Zweifel, die ich trage, möchte ich, Mutter, zu dir tragen. Alle Zweifel, alle Fragen möchte ich, Mutter, zu dir tragen. Wege, die ich selbst nicht kenne. Liebe Namen, die ich nenne, Schuld, die ich mir aufgeladen, anderen zugefügten Schaden. Ärgernis, so ich gegeben, all mein Wollen, all mein Streben, mein Beraten, mein Verwalten, mein Vergessen, mein Behalten, mein Begehren, mein Verzichten und mein Schweigen und mein Richten. Alle kleinen Kleinigkeiten, die so oft mir Mühe bereiten. Jedes Lassen, jede Tat, Mutter, dir vom guten Rat, leg ich alles in die Hände. Du führst es zum rechten Ende. Amen. And the English translation of this German prayer, prayer to the Mother of Grace. I want to tell you everything, all the worries that torment me, all doubts, all questions. I wish, Mother, to bring them to you. Path that I do not know myself, beloved names that I call, guilt I have taken upon myself, harm done to others. Uproar I have caused, all my wanting, all my striving, my advising, my managing, my forgetting, my keeping, my desire, my abstaining, and my silence and my judging. All the small little things that so often trouble me, every omission, every deed. Mother, I lay it all in your hands. You will lead it to the right end. Amen. Now, I think for me, that captures what I feel in this moment. I mean, witnessing all the horrors in the world, shootings, climate disasters, atrocities, the political and social climate that feels very fraught right now here and across the ocean. And I feel that Mary, Saint Mary or Maryam, she is an embodiment of compassion. She is this embodiment of grace and love. And in moments where everything feels so fractured and so fraught and so hopeless, you just want to crawl into that motherly embrace and want to be held and want to be comforted and want to feel safe. And she reminds you, that motherly embrace reminds you that at the end, everything will be all right. Because compassion is all encompassing. And for me, this prayer and this beautiful piece just captures what I feel, that this compassion is present. And that spirit, in the spirit of this prayer, I hope this learning reminds us that we can all bring compassion to the world, and that this learning is an act of bringing hope into the world, an act of compassion. And I think that's one of the legacies of Saint Mary, that she reminds us that we are still in those comforting hands, that our compassionate Creator is our safe haven, and that at the end we'll surrender all our sorrows and concerns and worries into his compassionate hands, and that at the end all will be all right. So I think for me it is a moment to remember, through the holy figure of Saint Mary, of Maryam, that compassion is present, and that we need to remind us that that the light and the mercy and the grace of God is what has the last word. So for our learning for these next 3 weeks or 3 sessions, I have three goals that I would like us to aim for. So it's still shocking to me that Islam is still the most misunderstood religion in the world and in the United States as well. So just to gain some basic religious literacy about the Muslim perspective on Saint Mary, I think would be a wonderful goal to achieve. When I shared my little essay with my neighbors, a lot of my non-Muslim neighbors came and approached me and said, I had no idea that there were so many similarities and points of connection between our traditions. And that really warmed my heart, that I was able to build bridges of understanding, to convey a little bit about that, about my tradition, and increase literacy in that regard. So one goal is really to just gain basic understanding and religious literacy on how Muslims have approached this holy figure and what Maryam or Saint Mary means to Muslims. And I think as global citizens, to know and to be aware what 2 billion Muslims around the world feel and think about Saint Mary is important, just to be, because we share this planet, and vice versa. The same goes for Muslims, that we just need to know about each other's worldview, and how what is it that shapes our views and our beliefs and our practices. I think is critically important, just to for to be a global citizen in the world. We also want to see how Saint Mary or Maryam can speak to our time and context. She is a figure who has meant so much to especially the Christian and the Muslim tradition, but we want to explore what is it that can also about her that can speak to our particular context and our particular challenges. The third goal, I think, is important to look at the holy scripture of Muslims, the Qur'an, and see if we can discover a posture of interreligious dialogue. How are Muslims, by orienting themselves to the Qur'an, finding a way to connect with other religious traditions? And as we will discover, there are certainly avenues where the Qur'an explains how to offer a posture of interreligious dialogue. So tonight we will do a little scriptural walk through some of the key passages that inform Muslim beliefs about Mary. So we will look at the portrayal of Saint Mary in the Quran. These are the theological foundations for every Muslim and any Muslim. Next week, we will look more into the sacred traditions of Prophet Muhammad, and who is considered by Muslims to be the final messenger of God and the mouthpiece of God. And so it's important to look to him and his sacred narrations and how he talked about Mary. And so that's going to be our goal next week. And then in the final session, I, as a Muslim woman who has had a context in Germany, in Turkey, and here in the United States, what is my own? I would like to offer my own Muslim voice, my own exegetical voice on Saint Mary, how I relate to her. And sadly, it's still the case that Muslim women are often objects of the conversation. They are not as present or as involved, or let alone women's voices when it comes to exegesis. That is also more of a recent phenomenon. But to just see and understand what is it and how is it that a Muslim woman in the 21st century, coming with all these different backgrounds, relates to the figure of Saint Mary, and how Mary speaks to me as a woman, as a mother, as a scholar in these different contexts. And I'm not saying that this is an exhausted, that I can ever offer a full, exegetical spectrum, but just coming from a very limited vantage point, again, from my own personal perspective as a Muslim woman, as a Muslim scholar. So for tonight, I have the goal to walk with you through these key scriptural passages in the Quran, just to start where Muslims are starting usually, and where Muslims are orienting themselves by looking at the Quran as the Holy Scripture. And then we will hopefully, what will emerge as a portrayal of Mary that will give us a better understanding. And after that, there will be a chance for you to talk, to go into the small groups, and then process together and then come back into the larger group. Now, in the past, we used Slido.com to just have a little bit of also your input here. I mean, for me, I just explained how I come to the figure of Saint Mary. I also named my own daughter after her, Maryam, because for me, it was the naming um, of Maryam after this amazing figure was an act of prayer. I wanted her to be as devout and as pious as she was. And so I wonder how you relate to Saint Mary. What does she mean to you? And if she's new to you, what is one thing that you are curious about to learn, or that you're looking forward to discover? So if you could just scan the QR code, and all the entries are anonymous. You just submit your answer and response, and then they will pop up on the screen for us, so we can all hopefully have a little bit of engagement here. And someone says, I'm curious to learn more about the Muslim understanding of Mary. Yes, that's our goal to offer that, and hopefully at the end you come out having a little bit of a more robust understanding how she's perceived or understood in the Islamic tradition. I see people are writing, so I'll give it a couple of more minutes to get some entries. I know I have to first think about the question. And somebody said, I see Saint Mary as the epitome of motherhood. She provides comfort, solace, and wisdom. As the mother of Jesus who called him into his ministry. My mother is called Maryam, and I have admired her my entire life, especially after knowing she received this name after Saint Mary. That's beautiful. I don't have a close relationship with Maryam. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the similarities and differences between Maryam, Mary, and Miriam as figures within 3 different traditions. Her human mother's heart was always so approachable and understanding. And then, as a devout Catholic woman, I'm so excited to learn more about Islam in general, especially about Maryam, whom we all love and admire. Ditto on that. And then we have a model of humility, and I'm curious to learn. As a lifelong Catholic, I have attended multiple schools and currently work at a school whose patron in Mary, Our Lady of Good Counsel. She has always been my guide and gig. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we are here in Maryland, so I think we owe St. Mary a course, a discussion, and what an honor to be able to be here with you and learn with you and hopefully to come to a richer understanding of who she was. So that's wonderful. Thank you for all your submissions, and I'll go back and read more of your entries. So please keep them coming. I always love to read your responses. So I already said that there are currently 2 billion Muslims around the world, almost 2 billion Muslims. And what they all share in common, have in common, is this belief, universal belief in God, and of course, very important, Prophet Muhammad as the messenger of God. So this is a very important marker of unity for Muslims, and Muslims come from so many diverse backgrounds, different geographical contexts, different linguistic backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. Naturally, I mean, we talk about a community, 2 billion Muslims who come from so many different corners of the world. And that's also reflected within the American Muslim community here in the United States. Now, there's rich diversity within the Muslim community, but that's not to say that there is not a shared orientation. And like I said, this shared orientation is the fundamental belief in one God, what we call monotheism, but also the belief in Prophet Muhammad as the messenger of God and all what he brought in that message. So that's why he is really important as a key figure to understand what he said about Mary or Maryam, and how that informs Muslim thinking around Saint Mary. I will call her Saint Mary just for the purpose of making sure that this is the same figure. But like you already heard, Maryam is the Arabic name for Mary in the Quran. So for Muslims then to come to a richer understanding of Saint Mary, the first orientation starts with the Quran. So the Quran for Muslims is the central authority who Muslims consider as the word of God. Now, I've said that in many classes before, but pedagogically, repetition yields results, and this is something that you will always hear from me. This is foundational. This needs to be stressed, and we need to begin here because this is where Muslims begin. Any regular Muslim turns to the Quran and wants to understand what God says about a specific figure, about a specific issue. And so there is strong engagement with the word of God. So the Quran for Muslims, in its ontological reality, is God's speech. And when they refer to the Quran, usually Muslims will say, God says in the Quran, God says in the Quran. So the question or the issue of authorship for Muslims is settled. There is no disagreement. It's across the board throughout generations. There's just this fundamental acceptance that the voice that speaks in the Quran is God. And the information that is provided is divine speech. Now, the second category for Muslim life is the Sunnah, which is the model or the habit or the customs, the tradition and teachings of Prophet Muhammad. And technically, we define the Sunnah as anything that the Prophet Muhammad said, did, or silently approved. And those sayings are codified in what's called the Hadith collections. These are written compendiums. It's a canonized collection of all the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, of his teachings, which also guide Muslim life. So that's that shared orientation of Muslims. Now, the level of commitment of Muslims can vary, just like in any religious community. You know, you have people who are more committed. You have, people, practitioners who have less committed. So that's a human reality. Not everybody, the Muslim community is not a monolith. It's just a human complexity that each of us are on their own spiritual journey to God. And that means that we all have our own individual spiritual evolution. And that's just the nature of being human. And so not everybody acts the same, thinks the same, feels the same, but there is nevertheless a shared orientation towards these sources. So let me turn now to the Quran. Like I said, it's a first source for Muslims in understanding who Mary is. And so it becomes very important then to look at those key passages. For Muslims, like I said, it's God who speaks, that they consider it the divine voice. And also to remind ourselves that the Quran emerged in the Near Eastern context. So it's very aware of the conversations that's going on in that milieu, the religious milieu of that time. You had, the different Christian groups in that area, the Jacobites, the Monophysites, the Nestorians, all these interesting conversations about the nature of Jesus, peace be upon him. But when the Quran comes into this religious milieu where Jews and Christians are operating and are present, it's like listening to these conversations. But then as a new kid on the block brings offers its unique narrative of the same figures. So you'll see that the Quran will mention biblical figures, but oftentimes offers a very unique and different reading of the same biblical narrative. So I call it the resident alien approach to the Quran. There will be moments where you feel resident in the Quran, where you feel familiar But then there will be moments where you feel alien. So that's what we call the resident alien in the Quran, that approach where you feel you can connect because there's a lot of familiarity. But then there will be also moments where you're taken aback and things are different. So the Quran is offering its own unique reading on certain biblical figures. There are similarities, but there's also differences. So just to flag that and preface that. So the narrative or the portrayal of Mary in the Quran, of Saint Mary, is we can find it in different chapters of the Quran. So it's not just chapter 19, which is named after her. That's of course the one chapter that is named after Mary. But we will find her narrative or her appearance in different chapters as well, like chapter 3, chapter 5, and chapter 21. And we'll see that later. But what's interesting, we encounter Mary first, to the prayer of Saint Anne, Hannah. So Hannah is Mary's mother, as we know, and she offers this prayer that is well known. It's in the Quran in chapter 3. And in Arabic, it goes like this. And it's a supplication that I've always recited when I was pregnant with my own children. And it's a beautiful supplication that a mother offers to God, and seek his protection, protection for the child, and a prayer to assure that the child is raised as a devout, as a pious person, as a righteous person. So her prayer in the Arabic original goes like this: Rabbi inni nazartu laka ma fi batni muharraran fataqabbal minni innaka anta as-sami'ul alim. So in the Islamic tradition, there is this, even Mary's birth is somewhat a miracle, because we read in the tradition that her mother, Saint Anne, was very old and she couldn't conceive children. And one day she sees a bird feeding its chick and she starts to cry. And she talks to God and says, "You have given this bird a child. Please also grant me a child." And so in her old age, she is granted that prayer, and God blesses her with Mary. And so in the translation, we see that she offers this prayer. Remember when the wife of Imran said, that's Hannah or Saint Anne, "My Lord, I dedicate what is in my womb entirely to your service. So accept it from me. You alone are truly the all-hearing, all-knowing." And then when she delivered, she said, "My Lord, I have given birth to a girl." And God fully knew what she had delivered. And the male is not like the female. I have named her Mary, and I seek your protection for her and her offspring from Satan the accursed. Now, the issue here is that, of course, at that time, Hannah was hoping that she will have a son, because only boys, only men were allowed to enter the sacred temple to engage in worship and sacred service. But then God creates a girl. And so she is completely shocked when she sees that she delivered a girl. And it's beautiful that we get this reassurance here that God fully knew what she had delivered. It was God's choice. It was God's will. God wanted a girl and a daughter for her, and he wanted a woman to enter the sacred temple. So it's quite a beautiful emphasis. And then also here you see that what is stressed, that the male is not like the female, that the woman is honored by being a woman, that God honors the woman by being a woman, and that the male is not the only standard here, right? So just to stress, that the Quran stresses it here, it's very interesting. And then she is named Mary, and then also the prayer that she will be protected from Satan. So it's very interesting how this already is a very countercultural account that it was God's will and his decree that a girl enters the sacred temple. And according to the Islamic tradition, Mary was only 3 years old when she entered the sacred temple. So we read here, so her Lord accepted her graciously and blessed her with a pleasant upbringing, entrusting her to the care of Prophet Zechariah. Whenever Zechariah visited her in the sanctuary, in the mihrab, now this is very important, the sanctuary is called mihrab, he found her supplied with provisions. He exclaimed, "Oh Mary, where did this come from?" She replied, "It is from God. Surely God provides for whomever he wills without limit." Now, what's interesting in the Arabic, then and there, so after Zechariah, Prophet Zechariah receives this response by Mary. No, this is very interesting. So already we have this account of a very miraculous event. Zechariah enters the sanctuary and then finds these incredible blessings, these provisions, and is completely puzzled. Who brought these blessings to you? Who provided you with these wonderful blessings? And her response is, it is from God. God can provide for whoever he wills. He doesn't need to have a cause or reason. So that is already a very miraculous event. And it's a reason why in Islamic scholarship, many Muslim scholars are actually trying to establish her prophethood, because so there is this very interesting discourse in the Islamic tradition and theological discourse, whether Mary is a prophet or if she is just a high virtuous woman, a paragon of virtue and devotion. But there are things here that definitely point to that direction, that she is already almost like elevated to this prophetic figure, because she is provided by God with these blessings, who somehow appear without any apparent cause. And that is puzzling to Zechariah, Prophet Zechariah. And in the Arabic, he immediately realizes, because he is also already in advanced age, he is he desires a child. And then and there, Zechariah prayed to his Lord, saying, "My Lord, grant me by your grace righteous offspring. You are certainly the hearer of all prayers." So by receiving this response by Mary, he simply is affirmed. He knows then, of course, God has the power to provide and give without any cause. He doesn't need he doesn't face any obstacle, right? So it's a very interesting conversation how this young girl, Mary, who probably is only 11, 12, already teaches Prophet Zechariah some very important lessons about God's power. God is omniscient, God is omnipotent. Causality is simply a will. It's not the causes who create, but God can directly provide in miraculous fashion. And so we already have here some very important evidence for her prophetic status. And just to stress, to be a prophet in Islam, I mean, in today's language, we use prophets a very casual way. In Islam, a prophet is chosen. It's not something that is given as a title to any lay person. It's not something you can acquire. It's a very high venerated status, and it's a chosen person by God. It's a prophet is an exemplar of piety and highest devotion to God, a moral exemplar, a sinless person also, that's very important. A prophet is a figure who is sinless in the Islamic tradition. So a prophet who is an example of devotion and faith. So prophetology is a very important concept in Islam that is not given, that title is not given to others and only reserved for the chosen people of God, who are role models for the community and exemplars of righteousness. So then Prophet Zechariah is convinced that, reminded of God's power, and then offers this prayer then and there through this powerful response by Mary. So she is teaching him actually a little bit and reminding him about this very important aspect of God's power. Now, I wanted to uplift this key term here, mihrab. And a mihrab is usually the prayer niche. So mihrab is used here in the verse to identify the sanctuary, use it in to point to the sanctuary. And when you enter a mosque, it's a place of worship for Muslims typically. You will see that you will find the mihrab, which is typically this prayer niche, here beautifully decorated with a Quranic calligraphy. That's the prayer direction. So every time when you enter the mosque, you see the mihrab. That's the prayer direction that points to the Kaaba, the sacred shrine in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, in today's modern Saudi Arabia. But that signifies the prayer direction for Muslims. And that is the phrase that is used here in this passage, which then, of course, brings into the collective memory of Muslims the presence of Mary, because she is there in this prayer niche, in this mihrab, in the sanctuary, engaged in devotion and worship and remembrance of God. This is a beautiful mosque in Istanbul. It's a Shakareen mosque. The architect is a woman, and I thought this is a very interesting way to do the mihrab. These are more classic ones. This is a more modern one, but just to signify that the presence of Mary is very evident and in these mosques, because they use the same term. So I found that very, very beautiful, just through that connection. So if we move on, so again, something that then prompted Muslim scholars to discuss her role as a prophet, again, a very high chosen title for a person, is when she encounters the angels, right? So she receives the news from the angels, like we read here in chapter 3 of the Quran. And remember when the angels said, "Oh Mary, surely God has selected you, purified you, and chosen you over all women of the world." So she is chosen over all women of the world. And this news is brought by the angels. And typically in Islamic prophetology, it's only the prophets who encounter angels. So again, there is something that then makes Muslims ponder about her very special role, that she's receiving these very, beautiful announcements through the angels that God has chosen her, and that she is a figure of purity and a role model, right? So already a very high status that she's chosen over all women. And then it says here in the Quran, "O Mary, be devout to your Lord, prostrate yourself in prayer and bow along with those who bow down. This is news of the unseen that we reveal to you. You were not with them when they cast lots to decide who would be Mary's guardian, nor were you there when they argued about it." So what happens is, of course, the people debate to whose care will she be under. I mean, who is going to take care of her? And then they're casting lots, and then the Quran tells the story about how Prophet Zechariah is then the one who ultimately is the guardian of Mary. And she was given to the sacred temple when she was only 3 years old, so very, very little, very, very young. And probably the sources tell us that she was around 11, 12 when she actually conceived Jesus. So very, very young age, where she's already going into this very important role. And so because the Quran is so clear and upfront about these statements, Muslims affirm the virgin birth. and have no qualms. And like I said earlier, God is omnipotent. If he's powerful, he can create a child without a father. And so Muslims throughout centuries and today have a strong belief in this miracle of the virgin birth, that the angel said, Mary, God gives you news of a word from him whose name will be the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, who will be held in honor in this world and the next, who will be one of those brought near to God. He will speak to people in his infancy and in his adulthood. He will be one of the righteous. And then she said, My Lord, how can I have a son when no man has touched me? The angel said, This is how God creates what he will. When he has ordained something, he only says, Be, and it is. And God will teach him writing and wisdom, the Torah and the gospel. So we already here have this announcement by the angels, the encounter with the angel again, who gives the good news about the Messiah, which is in the Arabic original, the Quranic original, Messiah, Isa ibn Maryam. So the Quran confirms the account here, and also establishes Jesus' role as the promised Messiah. Yes, so as I said, very aware of the religious milieu and taking up the conversation and making a claim and establishing, basically the statement. And we are already hearing here about the news, about the first miracle of Jesus, that he will speak as an infant to the people. But then also Mary is puzzled, right? Like, despite the fact that she is a devout, confident person of faith, this high elevated figure, even she is puzzled, right? How can I have a son when no man has touched me? How can God create without the cause, without the father, without, bringing two people together? And the Quran always goes back to that first creation story and says, it's not a big deal for God. I mean, you were a lump of flesh, and if God can create us the first time, then he can create us the second time. So always going back to the first or to the creation account and saying that the creation itself is a miracle, right? And so this even the creation of a human being with the Father is a miracle. But here, of course, that's another level, that you have God saying, this is easy for me. I mean, be, and it is. And so the affirmation that then Jesus affirms the Torah and the gospel is also important here, that there is a chain of revelation that the Quran also wants to affirm, and that the fact that Mary was raised within the foundations of the Jewish faith, that she came out of the Jewish faith, also stressed here, right? Now, the Quran calls Jesus Isa ibn Maryam, always uses that, or often uses that title, Jesus, son of Mary, just to emphasize again the humanity of Jesus. Of course, knowing what the conversation is, right? Making sure that he is the son of Mary. And then, of course, there's this implicit clarification that he is not the son of God. So the Quran is then basically conversing with two groups. So the address to the Jewish communities is that he is the Messiah, and to the Christian communities at that time to say he is the son of Mary and not son of God. So we see that there's a dual conversation taking place. So here the Quran says he will send him as a messenger to the children of Israel. And then here we have Jesus' voice. I have come to you with a sign from your Lord. I will make the shape of a bird for you out of clay, then breathe into it, and with God's permission. It's very important, with God's permission. Like the Quran always emphasizes Jesus' miracle with God's permission, that he could only do that because God gave him permission. It will become a real bird. I will heal the blind and the leper and bring the dead back to life with God's permission. With God's permission. I will tell you what you may eat and what you may store up in your houses. There truly is a sign for you in this if you are believers. So, like I said, for Muslims, then, because this is so clear cut here, the affirmation of these miracles is very strong. Like the virgin birth of Jesus, then that he heals the blind and the leper and brings the dead back to life. These are very strong Muslims' beliefs simply because the Quran always mentions them, right? And so, but also to emphasize that it is with God's permission that he is able to perform these miracles with the power of God. And like I said, so there is this conversation with the children of Israel, the address to the Jewish communities and to the Muslims, that there is this connection, this sibling relationship to previous communities, very important. So the Near Eastern context and the emergence of the Quran, and wants to establish the sibling relationship with the Jewish Christian tradition and then Islam, which basically means submission, devotion to God, is, perceives itself or considers itself the final message, but then links itself to these previous traditions. And so here we have that conversation taking place, this emphasis that he was sent as a messenger to the children of Israel. And then he goes on to say, I have come to confirm the truth of the Torah which preceded me and to make some things lawful to you which used to be forbidden. I have come to you with a sign from your Lord. Be mindful of God, obey me. God is my Lord and your Lord, so serve him. That is a straight path. So we have this conversation on both sides. So there are these three communities. So the early Muslim community was very aware of the Jewish, the Christian presence, and then the Quran, being mindful of these theological debates, providing its own unique answer, establishing Jesus as, in his role as the Messiah and the messenger of God who confirms the Torah, but then also brings the gospel. So in chapter 19, we have also here very important account about the birth of Jesus. So mentioned in the book, the story of Mary. She withdrew from her family to a place to the east, screening herself off from them. Then we sent to her our angels. We have again appearance of the angels who only, according to Islamic prophetology, appears to the prophets. We sent to her our angel, appearing before her as a man. So the angel appears as a man, perfectly formed. She said, I seek the Lord of mercy's protection against you, if you have any fear of him. But he said, I am but a messenger from your Lord. So angels are also messengers sent by God to announce to you the gift of a pure son. She wondered, how can I have a son when no man has ever touched me, nor am I unchaste? He replied, so will it be. Your Lord says, it is easy for me. And so will we make him, this is a royal we, the divine voice, but it's a royal address. So will we, God, make him a sign for humanity and a mercy from us. It is a matter decreed. So this is the same account that appears in the earlier chapter, I think it was chapter 3, but it's taken up again in chapter 19. So again, the emphasis of the miraculous birth of Jesus is stressed here. It's a very strong, I believe, affirmed by Muslims. So this already gives you a sense of how Muslims are, thinking of Mary in that regard. And of course, she is, we hear her, like she is, as a person of faith, as this person of conviction, is completely puzzled about God's power. And so it was ordained she conceived him. She withdrew to a distant place. Then the pains of labor drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She cried, Alas, I wish I had died before this and was a thing long forgotten. But a voice cried to her from below, Do not worry. Your Lord has provided a stream at your feet, and if you shake the trunk of the palm tree towards you, it will deliver fresh, ripe dates for you. So eat, drink, be glad, and say to anyone you may see, I have vowed to the Lord of mercy to abstain from conversation, and I will not talk to anyone today. So here we see her very human, very raw. She is in anguish. Just the whole situation. I mean, if you can just picture being in the wilderness alone in the desert, pregnancy, motherhood's already scary territory, but then you have to give birth to a child without a father. What a scandal at that time. And then you're completely isolated, no support, no help. I mean, it's just anybody can relate to her anguish and agony. And it's completely human, of course. She is fully human. To in this moment to just cry out and say, I wish I could die. This is unbearable. How am I going to survive this whole situation alone? And just this utter despair. I mean, you clearly hear her voice and the despair and the hopelessness, and then that voice comes out, the divine voice, divine help, and comforting her and providing her, with that stream and dates and fresh ripe dates, and so just in this moment of utter despair, you have divine intervention, and God's presence never abandoned her. God's mercy and grace, the Lord of mercy, and the whole surah just emphasizes God's compassion. Like throughout, you hear the word Rahman all over. Like compassion is so key, mercy is so key, and the whole account around of Mary. And so it's so beautiful to see then, God providing her with all that she needs in that moment. And then she takes a vow not to talk and to fast, not to talk, a vow of silence and to abstain from conversation. And then she is called to go back to her people. So it's very, I mean, just like leaning into uncertainty, leaning into the unknown, not knowing what's God doing there. I'm just in awe of this whole situation. I'm sure we can all relate. There are moments where we just feel, the uncertainty, the lack of control, and then not knowing what is God's plan, what's going on here. Why, and this complete surrender and submission and utter trust and complete conviction in his power and his wisdom. And then she returns to her people and carries this child again no farther, utter scandal, because perceived as that she has committed some kind of indecent, immoral act. So she went back to her people carrying the child, and they said, Mary, you have done something terrible. Sister of Aaron, your father was not an evil man. Your mother was not unchaste. So she pointed to the baby. They exclaimed, how can we talk to someone who is an infant in the cradle? And then the first miracle of Jesus takes place. He talks as an infant, and Jesus declared, I am truly a servant of God. He has destined me to be given the scripture and to be a prophet. He has made me a blessing wherever I go and bid me to establish prayer and give alms tax as long as I live and to be kind to my mother, and how he protects her and defends her. It's also a very touching account. He has not made me arrogant or defiant. Peace be upon me the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I will be raised back to life. That's also very strong belief in in the Islamic creed, that to affirm that Jesus will return at the end of time, because of the fact that's also mentioned in the Quran. So we have other accounts that speak to these theological debates that were taking place. And so we hear the Quran saying that is Jesus, the son of Mary. So emphasizing again his role, his full humanity. This is a statement of the truth about which they dispute, right? There's disputation, theological disputation. Was he fully human? Was he fully divine? Was he both? And then the Quran comes and has its own take on this. It would not befit God to have a child. He is far above that. And there are other accounts where the early Arabs at that time assigned daughters to God. So this is not just a conversation with Christians at that time, or for that matter, but the pagan Arabs at that time would say God has daughters, for example, and the daughters were looked down upon. And so that was another level of dishonoring God and saying that he has daughters and the sons belong to us. There are other passages who speak to that. But here specifically, the claim that God has children is rejected. It would not befit God to have a child. He's far above that. When he decrees something, he says only be, and it is. Jesus also declared, surely God is my Lord and your Lord, so worship him. This is the straight path. But factions have differed among themselves. What suffering will come to those who obscure the truth when a dreadful day arrives? How sharp of hearing, how sharp of sight they will be when they come to us, although now they are clearly off course. Warn them of the day of remorse when the matter will be decided. So here you have the Quran saying that there's clearly, emphasizing that these differences are real, that there's some real dispute going on among these different factions at that time, and continues to this day. Of course, these theological debates are not solved. But then issuing a warning that there will be a day of judgment where all these matters will be decided and there will be final clarification, but holds these, there is tension, right? This tension is affirmed, this healthy tension, and the disagreement is also something that the Quran reflects and doesn't fit in either box in that regard. So we have here again the Messiah, son of Mary, so establishing the role of Jesus as the Messiah, but also as the son of Mary. So there's this, like I said, the conversation and the dialogue taking place with both communities, right? So the Messiah, son of Mary, is no more than a messenger. There have been messengers before him. His mother was very truthful, so establishing her authenticity and credibility. That she was a member of a clerical class, that she was raised as a truthful person, that she did not fabricate these claims. So just like the Quran wants to stress those, those aspects. Both of them used to eat food, so both of them were fully human. There is no mention of their divinity. So Muslims do not refer typically to Mary as the mother of God, for example, Theotokos. That's a major difference. So as we see in these Quranic passages, and look how we explain science to them, then see how far they are turned away. So as you can see, the Quran is deeply dialogical, deeply interested in these theological conversations, and making its own claim, right? Saying that Jesus is the Messiah, the promised Messiah, but at the same time establishing the full humanity of Mary and Jesus. But a Muslim cannot be Muslim if they don't affirm belief, in belief in Mary and Jesus. So that comes with the whole package, because the Quran, throughout its entire 114 chapters, over and over, these are just a few, because there are also many, many passages about Jesus, establishes the importance that he was a messenger of God and Mary's role. So there is, technically, if a Muslim does not affirm belief in Jesus or Mary, they are, theoretically then outside of the fold of Islam, because the Quran is so clear and consistent in that regard. And so what does this mean when we have these type of interesting theological positions, the Quran wants to be in conversation. There is a theological imperative for Muslims to be in dialogue, to be in conversation with especially Christian and Jewish communities. And in fact, throughout history, Islamic history, Muslims have expanded that conversation also with other communities, Zoroastrians, Buddhists, Hindus. So you have scripture as being deeply dialogical, but also not being interested in just affirming similarity, but also saying there are some things that are different and holding, affirming both, affirming similarity, but also maintaining difference. So there's a very unique take here. So to sum up, and then let you go into the small groups, chapter 19 is the main chapter that is named after Mary or Maryam. There are other parts of the Quran that mention her as well, like I noted, chapter 3, 5, 21. And like we've read, she is chosen by God as the most virtuous woman. But there's also in Islamic theological scholarship the discussion about her role as being a prophet because of her encounter and conversation with the archangel Gabriel, because of the miracles that she is receiving, especially in the sanctuary. So there's some strong arguments that the scholars are posing. She is for Muslims a model of piety and devotion. Her full humanity is emphasized in the Quran, stressed fully human. There's no aspect of her divinity. And then we saw that she is mentioned throughout, from the beginning of her birth. We follow her early life in as the sanctuary as a young girl, probably, like I said, very, very young when she gave birth to Jesus, around 12, the scholars said, right? So, and then we also hear about the first miracle, Jesus being, speaking as an infant, protecting his mother from the accusation that she is a liar or that she committed some kind of immoral, indecent act. So that sums up the very basic Quranic portrayal of Mary in the Quran. I hope that was something that was clear to you. And I want you to go into your small groups for 20 minutes and discuss the Quranic portrayal of Saint Mary. What was new to you? What has surprised you? And briefly also introduce yourself, your religious background, your non-religious background. And in your view, why does the Quran make these statements about her? What's the Quran doing here? Maybe you have some personal theories, your own take as you're walking with me through these key passages. I'll be interested in your views and how you share them in your group. And then also, like I said, discussing a little bit the Quran's interreligious posture here. Like I said, it's deeply dialogical, very interested in these theological conversations, but there is some interesting position that the Quran is putting forward. In the room. So you already see, welcome back. And I hope you all had a fruitful conversation. So I'm not going to quiz you on all these important Quranic passages, but this is one thing that you've learned today I would love to hear. So use the QR code again and make me happy. What is one thing you've learned today? If there's, I'm not greedy, one thing, and I call it a night. And I think there was a lot of information. And please be assured you will receive all the PowerPoint, and you've already received the pre-readings. You can also go back and digest and process some more, but you will receive the PowerPoints and my colleagues will send out all the information to you. So let me see. Every single thing was new to me. Thank you so much for this wonderful first lecture. Thank you for using St. Mary as a bridge. That Mary is revered and respected. That there is a discussion about the status of Maryam as a potential prophet within Islam. That Mary is considered a prophet. Yes, that is a conversation. Maryam is the chosen one of God. God told Mary not to talk, but to let baby Jesus talk. Yes. All wonderful answers. Correct. Yes. The importance of women in the Islamic tradition. Yes, to that. Thank you for lifting that up, because that is something that is often not known, and Islam is perceived as a misogynist religion, which is, I feel, is such a distortion. Um, Mary is a very active figure, yes, in the Quran, very active. Her voice is there, and I didn't know how young Mary was when she had Jesus. Mary is so much more human than in the Gospels. Christians and Muslims both love Mary and Jesus. Yes, absolutely. Maryam may be a prophet. Yes, there's no final verdict on that, but we see elements of her prophetic role. Yes, Joseph. I mean, Joseph always puzzles people. Where is Joseph in this whole thing? No, he's not there. It's Mary alone who is really central in the Quranic account. We don't hear about Joseph. There are some extra Quranic uh, resources, but in the Quran, she is central stage. And I thank you so much for joining me for this first class, and I look forward to seeing you next week.